When I heard someone say, "Did you see the photos?" Claire looked gorgeous in her wedding dress. The floor dropped out from under me. A sharp pain shot through my chest. Claire, married. I couldn't believe it. My own daughter hadn't invited me to her wedding. Imagine being excluded from the most important moment of your child's life. When your own family treats you like you're invisible, the pain cuts deep. If you've ever endured an injustice inside your family, come with me. This is my journey to fight back with the strength so many women carry in silence. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like mine and yours. That Saturday morning, my little bakery smelled of vanilla and cinnamon. We were busy families picking up birthday cakes, neighborhood ladies asking for fresh pies, kids counting coins for cookies. That space was more than a business. It was my life's heart, the fruit of nearly 4 decades of quiet, relentless work. I was used to the cheerful whispers about parties, engagements, and weddings. But that morning, a single sentence sliced the air like an invisible knife. "Did you see the photos?" "Claire looked beautiful in her dress," said a woman in line, not realizing I stood just a few steps away, straightening a tray of cupcakes. My world stopped. My hands trembled. Frosting slid off the spatula, and for a moment the chatter in the bakery faded into nothing. "Claire, married." The woman kept talking, bright and carefree. It was a small ceremony, apparently. Not everyone was invited, but the pictures on Facebook are stunning. I took a long breath, trying to regain my composure. With a practiced smile, I turned to help another customer, but my heart was pounding out of rhythm. My daughter, my only daughter, had gotten married, and I, the mother who had carried every one of her dreams on my back, knew nothing about it. I tried to convince myself I'd misheard. Maybe it was a different Claire, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. There was only one Claire who mattered. While I counted change for an elderly customer, a memory surfaced. Claire, at 5 years old, running through my kitchen with flour on her face, saying she was going to be the most famous baker in the world, just like Mom. I laughed, even though I was exhausted, and told her, "You can be anything you want, honey. I'll always be right beside you." And I was. Always. I paid for her schooling. I raised her alone after her father died. I passed on trips, parties, even rest itself, so she could have what I never did. And now, in front of a handful of unsuspecting customers, I was finding out I hadn't even been invited to the most important day of her life. A knot formed in my throat, but I wouldn't let the tears come. Not there. Not in front of strangers. I finished helping people, gathered the empty tray, and slipped into the small kitchen in the back. Only there did I let my shoulder rest against the cold tile wall as if I needed something solid to keep me standing. Why? The question pounded inside me like a drum. What had I done to deserve this? A recent memory tore through me. A few months earlier I had given Claire a significant amount of money. She told me she wanted to start a small craft business. She spoke with such enthusiasm that I handed over my savings, proud and trusting, like a mother who believes in her child. What if that money helped pay for a secret wedding? Anger mixed with hurt. It wasn't only that I hadn't been invited, it was the feeling I'd been used. The bell on the front door chimed more customers. I washed my face, took a breath, and went back to the counter. I couldn't appear weak. I wouldn't give the neighborhood always watching any satisfaction in seeing me humiliated. While I boxed a cake, another sentence hit like a second blade. The bride was radiant, and Daniel looked so confident. I hear he's already talking about expanding their business together. Daniel, my son-in-law, the man I never fully trusted but tolerated for Claire's sake. My chest tightened. The humiliation wasn't just being left out. It was the feeling of being slowly replaced in my own daughter's story. In that instant I made a quiet decision. I wouldn't show my pain. I would tuck away every detail, every word, like pieces of a larger puzzle. From that moment on, nothing would be the same. That night, alone in my kitchen, I opened my laptop and typed my daughter's name into Facebook. There it was, the wedding. Claire smiling in a white dress, surrounded by friends and her new husband. No mention of me, no seat reserved for the mother. I shut my eyes, tears silent, and thought, if they think they can erase me from her life, they're wrong. I won't be discarded. Sleep wouldn't come. The glow of the screen seemed burned into my eyes. Every photo was an open wound. Claire dancing with Daniel, Claire cutting the cake, Claire hugging old friends. Not one image with space for me, the mother who raised her alone. I closed the laptop, but my mind kept racing, memories rolling past like a film I couldn't pause. I remembered the long nights at work, while Claire slept in a tiny bedroom crowded with dolls. I was in the bakery kitchen, kneading dough and baking trays of bread and cakes for the next day. Many nights I slept only 3 or 4 hours. I remembered turning down invitations from friends, keeping my heart closed to new relationships for fear someone wouldn't accept my daughter. Claire first, then me, I always told myself. When she turned 10, she asked for a bike. I didn't have the money. For weeks, I worked extra hours, selling cakes outside school until I could buy it. When I gave it to her, her eyes shone with happiness. Those were the moments that kept me going. My daughter's smile was the quiet reward for every sacrifice. But now, that same daughter had hidden the most important day of her life from me. I got up and went to the kitchen. I put the kettle on and made chamomile tea, hoping to steady my nerves. With each sip, the bitter taste of betrayal only grew stronger. Suddenly, another memory surfaced. Months earlier, Claire had made an odd remark. "Mom, you've been forgetting things. Maybe I should take over the bills." I laughed at the time. Forgetting things? I've run this bakery for more than 20 years. If I were forgetful, I would have gone out of business long ago. She didn't answer, just gave a strange little smile. Now, with all I'd learned, I could see that comment wasn't innocent. They were laying the groundwork, I thought, gripping my mug. The signs had been there, scattered among the small details. The sudden disappearance of the savings I'd given her for my daughter's project. Claire, pulling away, always finding an excuse not to visit. The way Daniel looked at me, impatient, calculating as if he was already planning the next move. Now the pieces were falling into place. I looked around the bakery kitchen. Every detail told my story. The old oven that still worked like a champion. Shelves lined with pans. The display case I had polished 1,000 times. The bakery wasn't just a business. It was my entire life turned into bricks, sugar, and flour. The thought that Claire and Daniel might put all of it at risk was unbearable. I sat back down, opened a notebook, and started writing not recipes, but memories. Each sacrifice, each thing I gave up, each detail my daughter seemed to have forgotten. It was like I was building an inventory of my own life, quiet record of all I had done. Hours passed. Dawn painted the sky orange. Exhausted, I closed the notebook. I decided I wouldn't confront Claire just yet. I would keep this to myself, watch, collect proof, and try to understand just how deep the betrayal ran. Still, the wound burned. The next morning, when I opened the bakery, people were already in line, and more whispers. There's always someone who knows a new detail: the dress, the party, the toasts, with everyone talking as if it were normal. A customer approached the counter and said softly, "I'm sorry you weren't there. It was a beautiful ceremony, but it wasn't the same without you." I forced a small smile. "Thank you," I said, holding on to the last of my dignity. Inside, every word was a thorn. Little by little, I noticed the curious looks, the judgment in some, the pity in others. My absence from the wedding had become a public spectacle. I kept working, but something in me was changing. I wouldn't be just a hurt mother. I would become a woman who learned to fight quietly. At the end of the day, when I locked up, I found an envelope in the mail with my name on it. Inside was a bank notice for a loan. The problem: I had never taken out that loan. Hands shaking, I leaned against the door and thought, they didn't just steal my place at the wedding. They're trying to steal my entire life. I stood frozen there for minutes, holding the envelope like a dangerous object. Plain paper hiding a threat larger than any neighborhood gossip. I took a deep breath and opened the letter again. The demand was clear: a substantial loan in my name, with payments already past due. How was that possible? I had never signed anything like that. I'd always been careful, suspicious of debt. The only loan I'd ever taken was small, years ago, to fix the bakery roof. I studied the document. There it was, my signature. I recognized every curve of my hand, but something was off, too rushed, shaky, nothing like my calm, careful signature. My heart slammed in my chest. Claire. The suspicion cut like a knife. Only someone close could have accessed my documents and personal information. I even remembered leaving a folder of old paperwork at her place. When she asked me to store it somewhere safe, the weight of disappointment nearly crushed me. That night I wandered my house like a ghost. I opened photo albums and stared at each picture. Claire at birthdays, Claire holding diplomas, Claire napping on the bakery couch after school. Was this the same girl now using me as a shield for debt? Tears came, and I couldn't stop them. But with the tears, a spark of indignation flared to life. The next morning, before opening the bakery, I drove to my daughter's house. I needed answers. Claire opened the door with a wary expression, like she had been expecting me. Daniel appeared behind her, arms crossed. "Mom, what a surprise," Claire said, without warmth. I took a breath and held up the letter. "Want to explain this?" She hesitated. Daniel snatched the paper from my hand and shrugged. "It's just a loan. No big deal. Time to think about the future to expand the business. You don't want the bakery stuck in the past, do you?" The floor seemed to give way under my feet. "Business? I never authorized any of this. You used my name without permission." Claire tried to sound gentle, but her voice came out sharp. "Mom, you've been forgetting things. We just moved up a decision that made sense anyway. Honestly, it's getting hard to trust that you can manage money." The words hit like a sentence. Forgetting things, the same insinuation I'd heard before, now spoken with clear intent, undermine my capacity. I shut my eyes, swallowing my anger. "Don't you dare treat me like I'm incapable. That bakery exists because of my work. I've never needed anyone to run my life." Daniel laughed with a smear of disdain. "You'll need help soon enough. People your age can't keep everything going forever. We're only trying to help." My blood boiled. This wasn't help. It was control. I took the document back and left, the door closing hard behind me. My heart was in pieces, but my decision was sharper than ever. I wouldn't let them destroy me. On my way home, I drove past the bakery. Through the window, I saw my youngest employee stocking shelves, smiling unaware of the storm brewing around me. I thought of how those walls were more than ovens and cases. They held my identity. I wouldn't let anyone take that from me. That evening, I called an old friend, Henry, the local attorney, who'd been buying my cakes for years. "Henry, I need your help. It's Claire and Daniel. They're trying to ruin me." While we spoke, I noticed movement outside my window. The curtain moved with the breeze, and for a split second I could have sworn I saw a figure on the street watching my house. My breath caught. Were they already watching me? I drew the curtain back slowly. The street was empty. My heart pounded. My breaths were short. Maybe it was just my shaken mind playing tricks, but a part of me knew Claire and Daniel wouldn't stop easily. I locked the windows, checked the doors, and sat back at the table where the envelope still lay open. The feeling of being hunted by the people who should have been my family consumed me. How did my life come to this? The next morning, as I walked into the bakery, the room felt warmer. Regulars smiled and asked about new flavors, but I felt the sidelong looks, curiosity mixed with gossip. Word of the secret wedding had spread. An old family friend couldn't help herself. "I don't understand. You raised Claire alone, gave her everything, and she didn't invite you. That doesn't seem right." I nodded and forced a polite smile. Sometimes children choose their own path. Inside, it felt like every conversation was another public judgment. Every visit was a reminder. I had been excluded. Later that day, Daniel walked into the bakery without so much as a hello, like he owned the place. The room went quiet. Customers stared. "We need to talk, Eleanor," he said, a cold smile on his face. I crossed my arms. "We can talk right here." He leaned on the counter and lowered his voice. "There's no point resisting. Claire and I have already taken care of a few things. You can't manage everything by yourself anymore. You're getting old. You missed deadlines, misplaced documents. The court will see that." Heat rose in my cheeks. "I've never missed a deadline in this bakery, and if you think you can intimidate me, you're wrong." He chuckled and leaned closer. "This isn't intimidation. It's reality. You can fight if you want, but in the end you'll thank us. Who better than your own daughter to take care of you?" Poison, dressed up as concern. I noticed the customers, some whispering, others pretending not to hear. The humiliation was public. Instead of taking the bait, I smiled, cool, unreadable. "Thanks for your concern, Daniel. If you're not buying anything, the door's right there." He stared at me for a bit, irritated by my calm, then walked out without another word. The quiet that followed was broken by a young customer's voice. "You're strong, Ms. Eleanor. Don't let them take what's yours." Words from a near stranger, but they sparked the ember I'd been guarding. I wasn't alone. Some people still saw the truth. That night, Henry stopped by. He brought a folder and, with a grave expression, confirmed my fears. "They used your signature for more than one loan application. We have to act fast." "But Eleanor, I need to ask, are you ready for a legal fight against your own daughter? I drew a breath and looked at my work-worn hands, then at the quiet bakery behind me. Henry, I raised her. I gave her everything. But if she chose to destroy me for money, she's not just my daughter anymore. She's my opponent, and I won't lose the life I built. He nodded. Then we start now. After he left, I went upstairs. Before bed, I looked again at the notebook where I'd been writing my memories and proof. I wrote, in a steady hand, "They think I'm weak. They'll learn I've always been strongest in silence." I turned out the light. Outside, a car crawled down the street, its headlights sweeping across my window before vanishing into the night. I closed my eyes, unsure whether rest would come. The war had only just begun. Sunday broke quiet. The street, usually full of kids, racing bikes, and neighbors trimming lawns, felt muted. I made my coffee, but the comfort it used to bring only reminded me how alone the house sounded. I sat at the table and opened the notebook I'd been filling. Pages and pages of memory, sleepless nights, years of work, small wins that once felt enormous. Writing it all down was my way of proving to myself and to anyone who might try to erase me that my life has weight, that it can't be reduced to a forged signature or neighborhood gossip. As I wrote, the past rose up like a tide. I was 27 when my husband died in a car accident. Claire was little. I was left with debts, a daughter to raise, and a bakery barely getting off the ground. People said I wouldn't make it. A few relatives even suggested letting Claire stay with her grandparents until you get back on your feet. I refused. She's my responsibility, my daughter, my future. The years after that were hard. I spent nights on my feet, kneading dough and testing recipes while Claire slept on a cot in the corner of the kitchen. Sometimes I hummed so the sound of the oven wouldn't wake her. There were nights my body begged me to stop, but my heart knew I couldn't. Every customer I served, every dollar I counted, was a brick in the future I was building for her. When Claire turned 12, she asked for ballet lessons. I couldn't afford the tuition, so I did what I know best. I cooked. For weeks I prepared boxed lunches and sold them to workers around town. That paid for the classes. I'll never forget her first recital, her smile under cheap stage lights, the simple costume I stitched by hand. She glowed on that stage, and I cried quietly in my seat. Later, as a teenager, Claire wanted a computer like everyone else. I couldn't buy it then. I spent almost a year saving, cutting every small Plazuno coffee out. No new clothes. On Christmas, I handed her the gift wrapped in bargain paper with a ribbon I made myself. She cried and promised, "One day I'll repay you, Mom. You'll see." Where did that promise go? I've sacrificed travel, relationships, rest. My future was always tied to hers. And now what I get in return is Exclusia's secret wedding. Loans in my name. The whisper that I'm forgetting things. I took a breath. The hurt ran deep. Yes, but a strange clarity settled in too. I am not the fragile woman they've sketched. I am the woman who raised a child alone and kept a business alive against the odds. A knock pulled me back to the present. Margaret, my neighbor who stops by for fresh bread, stood on the porch holding an extra cup of coffee. "I thought you might want some company," she said. Stepping inside, I thanked her. We chatted about the weather, the flowers, this season, old recipes. Then she sighed. "I saw the wedding photos. Dear, I don't mean to pry, but your absence hurt. Something essential was missing." My chest tightened, but I answered calmly. "Sometimes children forget where they come from." She squeezed my hand. "Don't you forget who you are. You are Eleanor. You built this. They can try to erase, but they can't steal your dignity." Her words were a balm. I heard someone say, "Did you see the photos?" After she left, gorgeous in her wedding dress, again. The floor dropped out from under me and wrote, "A sharp pain shot through my chest. I won't let them rewrite my story." I couldn't believe it. The mail slot my own daughter hadn't invited me to her wedding. Was a new envelope. Imagine not a bill, being excluded from the most important moment of your child's Claire life. And Daniel had officially petitioned for guardianship. You're invisible. Cold flooded my stomach. If you've ever endured an injustice inside your family, my hands shook as I read. Come with me. The petition was my journey to fight back with the strength so many women carry in silence. In need of supervision. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like mine and yours. Family. My own daughter was asking a court to take away my autonomy. Tears came hot and fast. It wasn't only the betrayal. It was the effort to turn me into someone invisible, someone without a voice. Memories stabbed through the haze. Claire's senior prom, how I worked double shifts to buy the dress she wanted, even sold old family jewelry. The night of the dance, I waited with the camera ready for a photo with my daughter. But she rushed out, We'll talk later, Mom. No time. I sat on the porch alone with the camera in my lap. Then her first job. I cooked her favorite dinner to celebrate. She showed up late with Daniel. Conversation circled him, his plans, his ambition. For the first time, I felt myself becoming a spectator in my own daughter's life. Now this summons made the pattern plain. The small exclusions, the sidelong looks from Daniel, all pieces of a plan to push me out. But there's what they don't know. I'm not breakable. I'm hurt, yes, but I'm forged by decades of work. The next morning I took the papers to Henry, the attorney who's been buying my cakes for years. He read in silence, pushing his glasses higher on his nose. They're moving fast, he said, which means they're overconfident. To win, we'll need solid proof you're fully capable. You'll have it, I said. Every detail, every receipt, every memory. They think I'm weak. They're wrong. This could drag on, he warned. It will be painful. My life has already been painful, I answered. What I won't give up is my dignity. I walked across the town square afterward. The sun was bright, but I felt a chill. People greeted me with polite smiles. Some looked away and whispered. The rumor had already spread. Her daughter filed for guardianship. Is Eleanor sick? Is she losing it? Each whisper stung. Each sting hardened me. I sat on a bench and closed my eyes. Far off, I heard kids laughing at the playground. I remembered bringing Claire there, her small hand in mine. When did it all slip away? That night I started gathering documents with a purpose. Certificates from classes I've taken, bakery invoices, bank records. I divided them into folders, like a teacher planning a lesson. Between the papers I found a note Claire wrote when she was 8. Mom, thank you for always helping me. I want to be like you when I grow up, strong and sweet. Tears came again, but this time they tasted bitter. My little girl's promise had curdled into ambition. She didn't want to be like me. She wanted what I built. Near midnight, exhausted, I switched off the lights and climbed the stairs. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from an unknown number. Better give up now, before it gets worse. My heart sprinted. No name, just the blocked ID. Claire, Daniel, someone doing their work. I deleted the message. The fear, however, didn't delete with it. Before dawn I made strong coffee and opened my notebook, again this time not for memories but for an inventory of proof. Current inventory logs from the bakery. The order book, dates and names correct. Tax receipts paid on time. Detailed recipes in my own handwriting. If they wanted to paint me as confused, I would answer with order. Customers came and went all morning, bringing not only orders but looks curious, pitying, sometimes mean. Our whole town seemed invested in my family's drama. By mid-afternoon, Susan Ann, old friend from my youth, walked in from out of town. Tell me the rumors aren't true. They're true, I said. They're trying to take the bakery. My name, my independence. I remember you with Claire on your hip, she said, shaking her head. You gave that girl everything, and this is how she repays you. Her words cut, but they also reminded me, people know my story. I am not alone in it. I won't give up, Susan. They think they broke me, but they have no idea how much strength I still have. Over the next few days I doubled down. I recorded my routines, camera on. I'd calculate costs, prep doughs, log orders, simple, clear proof of how I manage my work and my life. I started showing up at the community center. Not to hide, but to be seen, playing cards with the ladies, joining conversations, laughing at old jokes. Each laugh, each steady gesture, was a quiet rebuttal of their claim that I was slipping. Then, one afternoon, I found Daniel leaning against his car outside my shop, that calculating look in his eyes. You're wasting your energy, he said. It's inevitable. Claire only wants what's best for you. Why fight it? If she wanted what was best for me, I answered, I would have been at her wedding. She wouldn't have opened loans in my name. Bothnots not care, Daniel. That's greed. He tilted his head. Everything you have should already be Claire's. You've worked your whole life. For what? To die alone in an old bakery? Better to accept it? His words landed like punches, but I stood straight. I didn't work to die alone. I worked for dignity. And dignity isn't for sale. I walked away with my pulse pounding, less pain, now, more fire. That night Henry called. I found something big. One of the loans was signed on a day you were out of town. That could topple their case. I knew it. I whispered. I knew that wasn't my hand. Keep recording everything, he said. The more organized you are, the harder their lie is to sell. Later, Lying in bed, I thought about the secret wedding, the loans, the summons, the public humiliation. It all hurt, but it also revealed what has always been in me, a quiet kind of strength. For once in my life, I would have to carry myself. As I reached to turn out the light, an email arrived from a blocked address with an audio file attached. Subject line: "You need to hear this." I hesitated, then pressed play. Daniel's voice, sharp and smug. "As soon as we get guardianship, we sell the bakery. Claire, you know it's worth a fortune. After that, your mother can live on some small allowance." My blood went cold. This wasn't just ingratitude. It was a plan. I played it 3 times. Each time, the knife twisted, but each time, my focus sharpened. This was the truth they feared. The next morning, I took the recording to Henry. He listened, jaw tight. "This is gold," he said. "It proves their motive. Money. No more pretending it's about your health." "I'll fight to the end," I told him. "They won't take what I built. Then we'll be strategic. The court needs to see not just that you're capable, but that they're manipulative. We'll gather witnesses, customers, neighbors, people who have watched you work for years. The stronger the net, the harder it is for them to tear you down." For the first time in a long while, I felt something warm in my chest. I wasn't alone. I moved with purpose. I spoke to neighbors, old customers, suppliers. I told the truth without drama. Anger flared in their faces. Support showed up in their voices. "I've ordered here 20 years. You've never missed once. You've run this place by yourself. If that's not competence, what is? I'll testify. What your daughter is doing is shameful." Each pledge was another piece of armor. Humiliation began to transform into a shared sense of injustice. Even so, the nights hurt. After closing, I'd sit with my notebook, leafing through Claire's childhood drawings, her little notes. How had that girl become this distant woman? The grief was heavy, but I knew grief could be fuel. One afternoon, Claire walked into the bakery. Her face was tight, eyes glassy, voice rehearsed. "Mom, why are you doing this? Don't you see, we just want what's best for you." I raised my head slowly. "What was best for me would have been a seat at your wedding. Respect would have been best. But you gave me exclusion and lies. That's not care, Claire. That's betrayal. You're being manipulated," she snapped. "That lawyer only wants your money. Don't project onto me what you and Daniel are doing," I cut in. "I gave you everything, and now you want to take even my right to live my own life. No, I won't allow it." Silence pressed between us. She turned and left. That evening Henry came by. "We're ready for the first move," he said. "Witnesses are lined up. With that recording, the court will see who's manipulating whom." "Do you think I can win?" I asked. He smiled with steady confidence. "You've already won tougher fights. This is one more. And you're not alone." Later, I looked at the dark glass cases reflecting my tired face, tired, but resolute. The bakery felt alive around me, carrying my history, my strength, my dignity. I opened my notebook and wrote, "They think I'm a shadow, but I'm light. I'm the flame that kept this family standing. I won't go out now." Near dawn, a crash jolted me awake. I ran downstairs. The bakery door hung ajar, the lock splintered. Papers littered the floor, drawers dumped. Then I saw it. The folder where I kept the evidence receipts, notes, copies of documents was gone. My hands flew to my mouth to trap the scream. Someone had been here. Someone had stolen my defenses. The bakery's cold light felt harsher in the small hours before dawn. I stood there, frozen, staring at the ransacked counter. The silence pressed down like lead. The folder with my notes, receipts, and copies of documents was gone. Every sheet they took wasn't just proof of my sanity, it was a piece of my life. I crouched and gathered the loose pages the thief hadn't grabbed. Some of my old recipes were torn. Other pages from my notebook were scattered across the floor. I touched the paper like it was sacred. It was my story being violated. My heart pounded so hard it seemed to echo in the empty shop. It was Daniel, or Claire. It couldn't have been anyone else. I sat in the chair behind the counter and covered my face with my hands. For the first time since this battle began, fear almost won. If they were bold enough to break into my bakery, how far would they go? The sun rose slowly, and with it came the first customers. Exhausted, I tried to hide all signs of the night before. I set up the counter as best I could, shoved the remaining papers into a drawer, and pretended everything was normal. But the neighborhood has sharp eyes. People noticed. "Are you okay, Eleanor? You look worn out." a woman said while buying bread. I'm fine, just tired, I answered, forcing a smile. Inside, I was nowhere near fine. As soon as I had a moment, I called Henry. They broke into the bakery. They took the folder with the evidence. On the other end, he let out a heavy sigh. I was afraid they'd try something like that. Don't panic, we still have the recording. We can rebuild the paperwork. But we need to report this. Go to the police station. It will underscore how serious this is. I hesitated. What if they come after me even harder? What if they find out I'm filing a report? They're already coming after you. Now it's time to show them you're not afraid. At the station, I filed the police report with steady hands, even though my heart was racing. The officer listened closely and, before handing me the document, said, Ms. Eleanor, we don't often see someone your age face something like this with so much courage. Don't let them shake you. If you need us, we'll keep an eye out. Those simple words brought a thin thread of relief. I wasn't invisible. Someone still saw my fight. Back at the bakery, I felt the pressure from the community tightening. Customers whispered. Some looked at me with pity, others with a quiet kind of judgment. Every gesture felt like a verdict. I tried to keep my head up, but the feeling of exclusion kept growing. Late in the afternoon, as I locked up, I found two teenagers by the door, snickering. As I walked past, one of them muttered, Look, it's the old lady whose daughter didn't want her at the wedding. The comment hit me like a rock. On the outside, I held my posture. Inside, my heart bled. I went home and cried quietly, not because of the insult, but because my pain had become public spectacle. The community that once stood with me was now part of the humiliation. But through the tears, something shifted. Sitting on the couch, I wiped my face and stared into nothing. If they want to reduce me to a caricature, I'll show them who I really am. I won't be only the victim of this story. I will write the ending myself. I stood, determined. I opened a closet and pulled out an old box of photos, letters, and documents I'd saved for decades. My life was in there. Diplomas, the paperwork from when I opened the bakery, thank you notes from customers. I would reorganize everything. I would use it all. While sorting through the papers, I found a photo of Claire as a little girl, hands covered in flour, helping me roll out cookies. My heart ached at the sight, but it also grew stronger. You were my reason for living, my daughter. But you won't be my ruin. That night, Henry called again. Were you able to rest? No. But I found something better. Courage. I could hear the smile in his voice. Then we're ready for the next step. We'll build a full dossier. You'll tell your story from the start, with proof of everything. They want to silence you, we'll turn your life into testimony. I took a deep breath as a warm spark of hope rose again. I'm ready, Henry. They'll regret underestimating me. When I hung up, I heard footsteps in the hallway. My heart leaped. I grabbed a kitchen knife and moved cautiously toward the door. But when I opened it, no one was there, just an envelope on the floor. Inside, a single handwritten line, "You won't win." The paper slipped from my hands, but my gaze didn't waver. Now, more than ever, I knew this fight wasn't only about the bakery. It was about my soul. The note was still on the table when I woke up the next morning. The words, big, steady letters, seemed to shout, "You won't win." For a second, I thought about tearing it up and pretending it never arrived. But something in me had changed since the break-in. Fear wasn't enough to stop me anymore. Instead of destroying the proof, I slid the note into a clear sleeve and took it to Henry. They're trying to intimidate me, Henry. First the debts, then the guardianship petition, now this. How far are they willing to go? He examined the page carefully. Eleanor, this is serious. We're not dealing with a family dispute. This is a calculated attack. They want to break you down psychologically before we ever reach the courtroom. I drew a long breath. Then they won't succeed. I've cried. I've been afraid. All that's left is to fight. Back at the bakery, I decided to be honest with a few people I truly trusted. I called Margaret, my loyal neighbor, and two longtime customers, Thomas and Ruth, who've known me since we were young. In the back room, seated around the table, they listened in silence while I laid everything out: the secret wedding, the debts in my name, the guardianship attempt, the break-in, and now the threatening note. Margaret spoke first. "This is monstrous, Eleanor. But don't worry, I'll sit in every hearing with you. The judge needs to see who you really are." Ruth squeezed my hand. "You fed us when times were hard. How many of my kids' birthdays would have passed without a cake if not for you? We won't let anyone take your dignity." My eyes filled. The support network was small, but solid. Maybe that was exactly what I needed to counter the growing social judgment around me. Even so, the exclusion only grew more visible. Late that afternoon, as I arranged the display case, I heard two young women whispering outside. It's sad, but they say she really is losing her memory. Yeah, the daughter just wants to protect her. She should retire. The words landed like stones. I knew the narrative was spreading. Claire and Daniel didn't need just the court, they were already winning in the invisible court of public opinion. That night, Henry showed up with news. I spoke to someone at the bank. He confirmed the loan applications were made in person by Daniel. Using your documents, we have a path to charge them with fraud. A wave of relief washed over me. So they'll finally be exposed. Henry exhaled slowly. We still need more. They'll double down on the "you're not capable" angle. As long as they can push that idea in the community, the judge might lean their way. We need to show beyond doubt that you're lucid, active, and organized. How do I do that? By living your life, Eleanor. Keep working. Keep logbooks. Show you don't rely on anyone. The more normalcy you demonstrate, the harder it is for them to prop up that lie. Determined, I returned to my routine with discipline. I woke early, organized orders, greeted customers with a steady smile. Every interaction became a quiet piece of evidence against their accusation. I also started writing formal thank you notes to customers, delivering them with their orders, small gestures that showed care and attention. I knew that, when the time came, many would be ready to testify for me. But the enemy didn't back off. 2 days later, when I arrived at the bakery, I found OLD spray painted in red across the back door. The blow was brutal. With tears burning my eyes, I scrubbed the paint off with my own hands until my fingers ached. Every pass of the cloth was part humiliation, part resistance. I wasn't going to let that word stand. Worse than the paint, though, was what I noticed while scrubbing. Neighbors walking by, glancing over, and then looking away, as if they didn't want to get involved. The loneliness in that moment cut deep. That night, bontired, I listened again to Daniel's recording. His cold, calculated words echoed. As soon as we get the guardianship, we sell the bakery. I closed my eyes and breathed. They can try to rob me, humiliate me, silence me, but they will never erase me. I opened my notebook and wrote, my biggest mistake was believing a mother's love would be enough to protect me. I'm learning now that sometimes we have to fight even the ones we brought into this world. Before bed, I got a call I didn't expect. The voice on the other end was familiar but distant. Eleanor, this is Pastor James. I've heard what's happening. We need to talk. There are things about Daniel you may not know. My heart took off. What else could come to light? The next morning, I walked to the church to meet Pastor James. His invitation still rang in my head from the night before. If there was more to know about Daniel, I needed to hear it. He welcomed me with a gentle smile, though his expression was heavy. He led me to a simple room lit by stained glass windows that cast red and blue patterns across the table. Eleanor, I know it's not easy for you to be here, but I couldn't stay quiet. I nodded, tense. What do you know about Daniel? He drew a deep breath before speaking. He lived in this community before he met Claire. I'm not here to expose anyone's past sins, but back then Daniel had gambling debts. Several church members came to me asking for guidance after they loaned him money and were never paid back. My stomach turned to ice. Gambling debts. Claire never told me any of that. I don't doubt it. Daniel is charismatic. He knows how to manipulate. He won trust easily. But there was always a plan underneath. Many people distanced themselves from him as the problems piled up. Then he vanished. Months later, I heard he was in another town. That's when he started showing up with your daughter. I covered my mouth. The pieces were clicking into place. It wasn't just grit, it was a pattern. Daniel survived by exploiting others, and with Claire he'd found a willing accomplice or worse, a partner blinded by love. Pastor, could this help in court? He frowned slightly. Maybe, we'd need formal testimony. But many of those he hurt are afraid to speak. The past is still a raw wound. I clenched my fists. I'm not afraid. I'll knock on doors until I find someone willing to testify. People need to know who he is. Back at the bakery, I turned the conversation over and over in my mind. What hurt most wasn't Daniel's lies, but my daughter's silence. Did Claire know? Maybe yes, maybe no. But bonding herself to him, and turning against me, was wound enough. As I arranged cakes in the case, I heard the whispers again. They say the daughter's just trying to care for her. Poor thing. She doesn't even remember where she keeps her papers. It's a shame, but maybe it's for the best. I took a breath. Instead of shrinking, I lifted my head and smiled at everyone, serving with warmth and steadiness. Each gesture was an act of quiet resistance. That afternoon, Margaret rushed in, holding the local paper. "Eleanor, look at this," splashed across the front page. "Family seeks guardianship for elderly community member." The story, clearly fed by Daniel, painted me as tired, forgetful, unable to run the bakery alone. "They're trying to destroy you in public," Margaret said, indignant. I drew another steady breath, holding back tears. "Then it's time to show who I really am. If they want to turn me into a spectacle, I'll become living proof." In the days that followed, I doubled down. I filmed simple videos of my routine, calculating bills, logging orders, prepping recipes. Every detail became evidence of my capacity, but I could feel the pressure mounting. This wasn't just a legal case, it was a fight for my image in the place I call home. On a stormy night, as I was locking up, Henry arrived, soaked, clutching a folder under his coat. "I've got something that could turn the tide." He spread out bank records. "Daniel tried to open an account in your name. The bank got suspicious because the signature didn't match and reached out to me. This is outright fraud. We can use it in court." Relief and anger surged together. "So I'm not just a victim of exclusion, I'm the victim of a crime." "Exactly," Henry said. "And that's what we need the judge to see. Not a frail mother being cared for by a concerned daughter, but an independent woman under attack by people trying to steal what's hers." That night in bed, I turned everything over in my head. Years of sacrifice, quiet exclusions, a secret wedding now, all mixed with a plan built on fraud and manipulation. The pain was immense, but so was the clarity. I held the old photo of Claire as a child. "I loved you more than anything. But if you've chosen his side, you'll have to face the woman I've become." The next morning, when I opened the bakery, I found an envelope pushed under the door. Inside was only a photograph. Me, asleep in my own bed. Shock seized me. The air left my lungs. Someone had been inside my home. I stayed motionless for a long time, the photo in my hands. A current of terror ran through my body. This wasn't a simple threat. Someone had stepped inside my house, into my private space, stood by my bed, and took a photo while I was vulnerable. My hands shook. My heart pounded so loud it felt like the whole street could hear it. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about breaking me from the inside. I sat behind the counter and stared at the image again. The room was dark, lit only by the weak glow of the lamp. The framing was too crisp to be an accident. Whoever did this had taken their time. They meant it. A wave of panic climbed my spine. Were they still watching? Would they come in again? For a moment I thought of locking the doors, closing the bakery, and running. But then I heard Henry's voice in my head. "They just want you to quit." I inhaled deeply. No, I wouldn't run. That morning I took the photo straight to Henry. His face was grave. "This is more serious than we thought. If they've got the nerve to enter your home, they can try anything. I'll request protective orders from the court. You need safety, Eleanor." I gripped the photo. "I don't want to live locked up in fear. I want them held accountable for every single thing they're doing." "And that's exactly what we'll do," he said. "Every attack is more proof you're being persecuted. The court will see it." Back at the bakery, I decided not to hide. I called Margaret and a few close neighbors and showed them the picture. They were inside my home. "I'm not making this up. I'm not confused. This is what they're doing to me." Horror spread across their faces. Margaret held my hand. "This crossed every line. Eleanor, you're not alone. I will testify whatever it takes." Other neighbors, people who'd hesitated before, began to offer help. "I saw Daniel hanging around your house a few nights ago. If you need me, I'll say it in court. I've shopped here for years. You never miss an order. I won't let them say you've lost your memory." By exposing the truth, I felt the narrative start to turn. The whispers of doubt shifted toward shared outrage. Still, fear hovered. That night I slept with every light on. The photo lay in a folder alongside the threatening note and the forged bank records. They were my weapons, painful, but necessary. Before bed, I wrote, "If they think darkness will silence me, they're wrong. For every shadow they cast, I'll switch on a stronger light." 2 days later, Henry came with news. I secured a preliminary hearing. They'll have to appear before the judge. And this time we'll file not just as the defense, but as the accuser. We can charge them with fraud and unlawful entry. A weight lifted from my shoulders, so they'll finally have to face me, in front of everyone. Exactly, he said, a short smile on his face. We'll use everything, the recording, the photo, the note, the documents. They've dug their own legal grave. That same night, as I was lowering the blinds, Claire appeared. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. For a second, I almost believed there was regret there. Mom, I don't want this to keep going. You don't understand. Daniel is just trying to secure our future. I lifted my chin, steady. And my future, Claire. And the lifetime I poured into you. Are you willing to burn all that down for money? She faltered, said nothing, and left. I stood alone in the empty shop, heart in pieces. I still loved my daughter, but love no longer erased the pain of betrayal. In the middle of the night, a new text lit my phone. Just 4 words, see you in court. I closed my eyes and drew a deep breath. This time, I didn't feel fear, only certainty. I was ready. The courthouse was packed that morning. Footsteps echoed through the hallways, blending with the buzz of attorneys, relatives, and the curious who'd come to watch the hearing. For many, my case had become the town's main spectacle. I walked slowly, held up by the quiet dignity I'd cultivated across a lifetime. I wore a simple navy dress and carried a neatly organized folder with the documents I'd managed to rebuild. My heart raced, but my posture stayed firm. Henry, at my side, leaned in and whispered, "Remember, Eleanor, we don't have to prove everything today. We just need to show that you're lucid and that they have ulterior motives. The judge needs to see who you really are." I nodded, drawing a deep breath. "They'll see me, Henry, not the version they invented who I am." When I stepped into the courtroom, heads turned. Some nodded politely, others just stared. In the front row, Margaret and a few neighbors sat in quiet support. Across the aisle, Claire and Daniel were already seated. My daughter kept her eyes down, twisting her hands. Daniel wore the easy confidence of a man who believed he'd already won. The judge entered and the room fell still. "We are here to consider the petition for guardianship of Ms. Eleanor, filed by her daughter, Claire, and her son-in-law, Daniel." The words cut like blades. I sat tall, even as the humiliation pressed in, being judged incompetent because of my own child. Claire's attorney spoke first, voice measured, narrative polished. "Your Honor, my client wants only her mother's well-being. Ms. Eleanor, nearly 60, has shown lapses in memory and trouble managing her bakery. Loans taken in her name prove she's no longer fit to handle finances alone." Each sentence stabbed. My hands tightened in my lap, blood thrumming. Lapses, difficulties. I'm the woman who rises before dawn, runs a business, and has fed loyal customers for decades. Then Henry rose, unhurried. "Your Honor, this is not a worried daughter. It's an attempted swindle. My client is fully capable of managing her life, and we will show it." The loans cited were not taken by her at all, but by Daniel, who forged her signature. "We have banking records that strongly suggest fraud." A murmur rippled through the room. Daniel pursed his lips and kept still. Henry went on, "We also have community witnesses who can testify to Eleanor's clarity, daily work, and independence. This is not incapacity, it is manipulation." The judge called me to the stand. My heart pounded, but my steps were steady. I sat, breathed, and looked the room straight in the eye. "Ms. Eleanor, can you tell the court how you run your life and business?" the judge asked. I spoke calmly, without rush. "I wake up at 5 every day. I open my bakery, organize inventory, prepare orders, and log each one in a notebook. I pay my taxes on time. I track every expense. I've done this for 30 years. If I weren't capable, that shop would have closed long ago." Simple words, but they filled the air with weight. "And what about the loans?" the judge asked. I lifted my folder and showed copies. "I never authorized any of them. I recognized the signature, but I didn't sign. I can prove that on the day one contract was executed, I was out of town and I have people who can attest to it." The judge examined the papers in silence. Then, unexpectedly, Claire asked to speak. She stood, voice trembling. "Mom, we're not against you. We just want you safe. You forget things. You overwork. Can't you see we're trying to help?" I turned and met her with tear-bright, steady eyes. "Help? Was it help to exclude me from your wedding? Help to take out debts in my name? Help to invade my home and leave threatening notes? Was that help?" The room froze. Claire didn't answer. Daniel squeezed her arm, urging her to sit. The judge tapped his gavel, restoring order. I will not rule today. We need testimony and a full review of the evidence. But I'll note this. What I see here looks less like incapacity and more like a family conflict with strong indications of fraud. I exhaled. Not a victory, not yet, but the first crack in their castle of lies. Outside, still surrounded by whispers and stares, a local reporter thrust a mic toward me. Ms. Eleanor, how does it feel to be accused of incapacity by your own daughter? Do you fear losing everything in the final ruling? I stood my ground. Any answer could shape public perception. With a steady voice, I said, I feel betrayed not by strangers, but by those who should stand with me. I also feel strong, because I know who I am and what I built. The truth will come out. I'm not afraid of that. Back at the bakery, Margaret waited by the door. You were brilliant, dear, firm and composed. Everyone noticed. I smiled, tired, but grateful. I hope it's enough. They still have plenty of tricks. And you have the truth, she said, squeezing my arm. That weighs more. Not everyone agreed. The next day, the local paper ran, elderly mother claims financial scheme. Daughter says she's just concerned. The piece feigned neutrality, but dripped doubt as if I might truly be blind to my own fragility. I read it behind the counter. Every line felt like a fresh wound. People reacted in different ways. Some came just to show support. We're with you, Eleanor. No one who runs a bakery like this is incapable. Others wore pity or worse, that smug concern. It's sad. Maybe the daughter only wants the best. I smiled politely. Inside, the weight of quiet judgment pressed like a stone. By late afternoon, Henry arrived with new marching orders. We need the public on your side. They're already playing the media. If you stay silent, their narrative wins. Would you agree to interviews? I hesitated. I'm not a spotlight woman. I've always lived with my hands in the dough and my heart quiet. But this was different. If I didn't speak, I'd be erased. I'll do it. Not to fight, just to tell my life as it is. Dignity. Henry smiled. That's exactly what we need. Days later, a local TV crew filmed me at work. While I whisked batter and explained recipes, I answered their questions calmly, how I started, what it was to raise a daughter alone, all the sacrifices. I'm not perfect, but I've never been incapable. Every cake, every loaf, every birthday this town has celebrated because of this kitchen, none of it came from confusion. What's happening to me isn't care. It's an attempt to erase me. The reporter, visibly moved, rapped with, it's hard to see someone this steady portrayed as fragile. The segment aired the next day. Some who doubted began to shift. The community, once whispering, now debated openly. Daniel hit back fast, his version on a local radio show. We're just worried. My mother-in-law forgets, Bill's misplaces documents. We're trying to protect her. It's our duty. The narrative war intensified. One evening, Margaret brought a bag stuffed with anonymous notes neighbors had left for me. Some were warm. We're with you. Others were knives. Accept help before it's too late. I read them all, slowly. I tucked the kind ones into my notebook. A reminder I wasn't alone. The cruel ones went into a folder marked evidence, proof of the social pressure being used against me. In the quiet of night, I replayed all the tiny exclusions of the past, being left out of school meetings, missing from family photos, not mentioned in my daughter's plans. Each small slight now fit into a larger mosaic of disrespect, but I also pictured those who stood with me, Margaret, Henry, neighbors, even customers. Humiliation still hurt, but it was hardening into fire, not just to endure, but to show everyone I was stronger than they imagined. As I locked up that night, another envelope waited. Inside the formal notice was a handwritten line in a familiar hand. At the next hearing, you'll regret fighting us. Ice slid down my spine. This wasn't manipulation anymore. It was a bare threat. The note sat on my table the next morning. Broad, hurried strokes, so much like Daniel's, cast a shadow over my kitchen. At the next hearing. You'll regret this. I inhaled. Fear tried to spread, but I'd learned to burn it for fuel. I slid the note into my evidence folder. Every threat, every humiliation would be used against them. The bakery was crowded that day, drawn by the smell of fresh bread and the irresistible pull of gossip. Some bought cakes, others simply stared and whispered. That's when Daniel walked in, flanked by two men who looked like friends. The room went quiet. We need to talk, Eleanor, he said with a thin smile. I stayed even. If it's more threats, I have nothing to hear. Court is where that belongs. He came closer, resting both hands on the counter. You don't get it. You're embarrassing your own daughter. The whole town is talking. This could end badly for everyone. I met his gaze, unblinking. Truth doesn't shame people. Lies do. His buddies snickered under their breath. The humiliation was public. My chest tightened. Before I could speak, Margaret stepped through the door. If you came to intimidate Eleanor, you can leave. We all see what you're doing, she said, loud enough for every customer to hear. Daniel's jaw clenched. You'll regret this, Eleanor. You're digging your own grave. He left a trail of tension behind him. That night, I gathered Margaret, Susan, and Thomas and Ruth at my kitchen table. I poured tea and laid out the evidence, the note, the photo, the recording. They want to crush me. I won't fight alone. I need you as witnesses. Thomas spoke first. I'm in. Ruth nodded firmly. Me too. You've never missed an order or mixed up a payment. You're the most organized person I know. For the first time in a long while, warmth spread through my chest. I wasn't just a woman being ground down, I was a woman surrounded by allies. But the tension didn't ease. Days later, I found my car defaced, one word slashed in red across the paint. LIAR. Anger burned, but I didn't cry. I took
When
photos
I heard
and
someone
texted
say,
Henry.
"Did you see
They
the
keep
photos?"
going. Claire
Henry,
looked
"So will
gorgeous
I,"
in her
the
wedding
following
dress.
night.
The floor
I got
dropped
an
out from
unexpected
under
call
me. A
reserved.
sharp
Pain
pain
shot
Ms.
through my
Eleanor.
chest.
I
Claire,
can't discuss
married.
details.
I couldn't
but I
believe
need to
it.
warn you.
My own daughter
Your
hadn't
accusers are
invited me to her
preparing
wedding.
something big for the next
Imagine
hearing.
being
Don't
excluded from the
underestimate
most
it.
important
I
moment
gripped
of your
the phone.
child's life.
What
When
else
your
was
own
coming?
family treats
I
you
hung
like
up
you're
slowly.
invisible.
The warning,
pain
heavy
cuts
in my
deep.
ears.
If you've
Something
ever
big.
endured an
A cold
injustice
thread
inside
ran
your
down my
family,
spine.
come with me.
Daniel
This
never
is my
played
journey
clean.
to fight
The
back
next
with the
morning at
strength
the
so
bakery,
many
the
women
stairs
carry
were
in
sharper.
silence.
People
Subscribe
bought
to the
bread and
channel
cake,
for more
but
stories
what they really
like mine
wanted
and
was
yours.
to study me, every word, every gesture. Whispers about an approaching final hearing. Speculation about what Claire might bring. I kept my face calm. Every smile, every neatly boxed order said the same thing. I won't break. Near closing, Henry arrived, carrying a thick folder and a tense look. I've heard they're trying to get a medical report against you. I frowned. A report? But there's nothing wrong with my memory, Henry. You know that. I do. But they may have convinced a doctor to sign off without rigor. We need to be ready. I want you to do a full evaluation with physicians we trust so we have official proof. I nodded. Heart faster. If that's the card they'll play, I'll meet at his. 2 days later, I sat through batteries of tests. Memory, logic, coordination. I answered calmly, like I was working a recipe in my head. When we finished, the specialist smiled. Ms. Eleanor, your mind is in excellent shape, more active than many folks far younger. The report will reflect that. I breathed out, lighter. Finally, something scientific to cut through Daniel's lies. Meanwhile, the town stayed split. At the park, in line, at the store, on church steps, my case was everyone's soap opera. Some called me a victim. Others insisted Claire was just taking care of her mother. Everyone had chosen a side. One rainy evening, Margaret knocked, eyes worried. I'm hearing strange things. They say Daniel has something on you, a witness for the next hearing. My chest tightened. Who? What more can they invent? I don't know. Just that it's someone close, someone who could hurt your credibility. The words dropped like weight across my shoulders. I barely slept, sat in bed with the lamp on, wondering who they might turn against me. The next morning, another letter waited at the bakery door. Longer this time, careful penmanship. Eleanor, you fool yourself thinking the community's on your side. Everyone knows the truth. Your mind isn't what it was. At the final hearing, we'll prove it. Don't fight the inevitable. I read it twice. Anger burned, but so did clarity. Daniel was desperate. The more proof I gathered, the more he escalated. I filed the letter with the others and wrote in my notebook, they have a secret weapon. I have something they'll never have, the truth. On Sunday I went to church. I needed quiet. Pastor James hugged me and reminded me of scripture. The truth shall set you free. On the wooden pew, I let tears fall, cleansing tears, not despair. I walked out lighter. The fight was far from over, but I'd found something essential again, faith in myself. The night before the hearing, Henry called, voice grave. Eleanor, I found out who their surprise witness is. Someone you'd never expect. Prepare yourself, tomorrow might be the hardest day of your life. I tightened my grip on the phone, heart sprinting. Who would stand against me? The courthouse was even more crowded than at the first hearing. My case was no longer just a legal proceeding. It had turned into a public spectacle. People who had never set foot in a courtroom squeezed into the benches to watch, journalists clustered by the doors, microphones ready to catch every word. I walked beside Henry with my head up and my heart on fire. I hadn't slept a wink, replaying the same question until dawn. Who was their so-called surprise witness? With every step, Henry's warning thudded in my chest. It's someone you would never expect. When I sat at the defense table, I saw Claire and Daniel across the aisle. My daughter kept her eyes down, refusing to meet mine. Daniel wore a triumphant smile, like he'd already won. The judge opened the session. Today, we'll hear new witnesses for the petitioners. Claire's attorney rose. Your Honor, we call Mrs. Margaret Dawson. My heart stopped. Margaret, my neighbor, my confidant, the woman who had carried coffee to my door, heard my private grief, promised to stand by me. I stared as she rose from the gallery and walked to the stand. Every step felt like a betrayal come alive. The questioning began. Mrs. Dawson, you've known the respondent for many years. Yes, we've been neighbors for over 20 years, and in that time, have you noticed recent changes in her behavior? Margaret hesitated. For a heartbeat, I believed she would tell the truth. Then, in a wavering voice, she said, yes, she's more forgetful now. Sometimes repeats stories. She looks tired. A murmur rippled through the room. Air deserted my lungs. So in your opinion, her daughter is simply trying to keep her safe? Eyes downcast, Margaret whispered, I believe so. I pressed my hand to my mouth to keep from crying out. That was the knife I never saw coming. Henry rose for cross. Mrs. Dawson, can you give concrete examples of this forgetfulness? Well, sometimes she didn't remember where she left her keys, or mixed up trash day. Henry's smile turned wry. So in your view, misplacing keys, which any human being can do, is proof of incapacity? Another rumble from the gallery. Margaret shifted, visibly uncomfortable. He pressed on. You can also confirm that Eleanor runs her bakery alone, serves customers daily, prepares complex recipes, and keeps the books in order. Yes, she admitted, voice barely audible. So what we have is not an incapable woman, but a capable one who, like anyone, may misplace a key or confuse a pickup time, yet has kept a business running for decades. Correct? Silence. Finally, a faint, correct. The judge made notes. Henry returned to his seat. I, however, was shattered. It wasn't just her testimony, it was the dawning fear that even the people I trusted could be bought, manipulated, or scared. During recess, Henry pulled me into the hallway. They thought this would break you. They nearly managed it, but in the end, she confirmed you keep everything in order. That softens the blow. She was my friend, I said, still in shock. She sat at my table. She promised me, if Margaret can be turned, who's next? They want you to doubt everyone, he said, gripping my hands. Don't forget, we still have allies, and our proof is stronger. Back in the courtroom, the pain still throbbed, but something inside me hardened. If even friendship could be weaponized, then I would fight alone. If I had to end, I would not bend. The judge called the next witness. Daniel smiled openly. We call Mrs. Claire Johnson, Eleanor's daughter. I closed my eyes. I knew my daughter would speak against me. Hearing it, though, would be a wound like no other. Her name rolled through the courtroom like a muted thunder. I kept my posture straight while my stomach twisted. Watching my own child take the stand against me was a weight no lifetime of sacrifice had prepared me for. Claire's steps were hesitant. Her face was pale, eyes wet, but her expression hardened as the questions began. Mrs. Johnson, why did you petition for guardianship over your mother? Because I love her, she said, voice trembling, and because she can't care for herself anymore. A low stir spread across the room. My heart cracked. Love, was that what she called dragging me into court to strip me of my life? What signs made you believe your mother is no longer capable? She forgets to pay bills, loses documents, mixes up important dates. Sometimes it feels like she doesn't remember conversations we've had. Small, ordinary lapses, alchemized into incapacity. Exaggerations dressed as absolute truth. Henry stood. Mrs. Johnson, can you give one concrete example of a bill your mother forgot to pay? There was a time the lights were almost shut off. Henry lifted a folder. You mean the May bill? Here is the receipt, paid on time. There was no shut-off notice, only a one-day delay in mail delivery. A wave of whispers. Claire swallowed hard. She's been tired, confused. Sometimes, she tried, tired. Henry stepped closer. Or exhausted from carrying a daughter and son-in-law who live off her. The gallery reacted. The judge called for order. Claire flushed, shaken. Claire's lawyer tried to pivot. Mrs. Johnson, was your mother invited to your wedding? Claire bit her lip. No, it was a small ceremony, just close friends. Close friends, Henry said evenly. But not the woman who raised you alone, paid for your schooling, financed your life. That's not care. That's exclusion. The silence was heavy. Even the judge arched a brow and made a note. When Claire stepped down, she glanced at me through tears. I didn't look away. There was pain in my gaze, yes, but also a steadiness she couldn't face. She hurried back to Daniel. During the break, Margaret approached, flustered. Eleanor, I didn't mean to hurt you. They pressured me, threatened me. I was just scared. I met her eyes. We all have fear. The difference is what we do with it. I chose to stand. I turned away. When we resumed, Daniel's attorney offered a new exhibit with a smirk. Your Honor, a medical report documenting Mrs. Carter's memory lapses. A chill spread through me. The judge would review it. Henry objected, but the document was opened. A report signed by Dr. Howard, the judge read, stating frequent memory lapses and early cognitive confusion. I had never met that man in my life. Henry stood. Your Honor, my client was never examined by this physician. The petitioners must produce date, location, and proof the exam occurred. The report is signed and stamped, the judge said. With respect, a stamp is not the truth. Show the appointment record, billing, anything that proves this happened. The judge set admissibility aside for review. I steadied my breath. In my folder were the evaluations Henry had insisted I take full neurocognitive testing done days ago, with dates, signatures, and electronic logs. At the next recess, Henry spread them out. This not only neutralizes their fake, it proves evidence fabrication. You think I still have a chance? I asked. You don't just have a chance, he said. You have the truth. When court reconvened, Henry presented my legitimate medical reports, recent signed by credentialed specialists, time-stamped and verifiable. The judge looked back to Daniel's counsel. How is it that your report dated 2 months ago has no corresponding medical records? The lawyer stammered. Daniel seethed. Claire bowed her head. Whispers rose. So they forged evidence. Even dragged a doctor into it. Henry pressed. We ask that the report be stricken and that an investigation for document fraud be opened. My client cannot be victimized twice, first by exclusion and manipulation, and now by fabricated proof. The judge nodded gravely. This court does not tolerate falsification. If there are indicia of fraud, there will be consequences. Daniel's smile was gone. My heart still hurt to see Claire sitting in silence beside a lie that big. I searched her face for any spark of the girl who once promised never to leave me. Then Daniel asked to address the court. Your Honor, even if that report is disputed, everyone knows my mother-in-law can't run the bakery alone. I have a witness ready to prove it. Bring the witness, the judge said. The doors opened, and one of my own employees walked in, head down, face tight. David. They had turned someone from inside. He took the stand. Yes, I work at Eleanor's bakery, and you've seen things that show she can't manage it anymore. He cleared his throat. Sometimes she gets mixed up with orders. I think she once forgot a birthday cake. Henry stood. Which cake? Mr. David. Maybe. Mrs. Thompson's. Henry produced a receipt. Dated, signed, with a photo of the delivered cake you drove the bakery van that day. Confirm. David faltered. Maybe it was another order. So you can't name a single concrete example. Silence. Red cheeks. Were you pressured to testify? Did someone ask you to speak against Eleanor? He glanced at Daniel. I just want to tell the truth. Henry turned to the judge. Please note the evasiveness. The testimony collapses against documented proof. The judge made notes. I watched with a tight chest. It hurt to see a young man twisted into a pawn, yet with every contradiction, the truth grew louder. By day's end, the judge said, my decision is reserved. Prepare for the next hearing. Defense witnesses will be heard. Daniel's grin had vanished. Claire looked smaller, as if the weight were finally finding her. Reporters swarmed outside. Mrs. Carter, how do you feel about accusations from a neighbor and an employee? Betrayed, I said, steady. But the truth doesn't depend on who turns their back on me. It depends on what I've built and who I am. And no one can erase that. That night, back at the bakery, I stood before the wall of notes and traced each message of support with my fingertips. Then I wrote in my notebook, they weaponize friends, neighbors, employees. Still, the truth stands on its own. When the last mask falls, everyone will see who has truly been losing. The next morning, Henry called early, tense, but triumphant. Eleanor, we've secured a decisive witness. Someone close to Daniel is ready to talk. It could change everything. I went quiet, my heart pounding. Who would dare face Daniel Hedden? I woke before sunrise on the morning of the next hearing, my heart beating with a strange mix of dread and hope. Henry's words kept echoing. We've got a decisive witness. Someone close to Daniel is ready to talk. Who could it be? A relative? An old friend? A creditor he'd burned and forgotten? The uncertainty followed me all the way to the courthouse doors. Inside, the place was more crowded than ever, reporters jostling for space, neighbors whispering in pews, tension humming like a live wire. I kept my eyes forward, spine straight, even as my stomach tightened. I slid into my seat beside Henry and couldn't help asking, who is it? He gave the faintest smile. You'll know at the right moment. Trust me, it'll land harder that way. I drew a breath and held it. The judge called us to order. Today we will hear the defense's witnesses, he said. Henry rose. His voice carried, steady and unhurried. Your Honor, the defense calls Michael Turner. A current ran through the room. Michael Turner, Daniel's old business partner from the home renovation venture that crashed years ago. I'd met him once, maybe twice, but the way Daniel flinched at the name told me everything. This was a fuse. Michael took the stand. He looked straight at Daniel, who for once stared down at the table. Henry began. Mr. Turner, what is your history with Mr. Johnson? We were partners for about 2 years. At first it looked promising. Then I discovered Daniel was siphoning company money to cover personal debts, gambling. When I confronted him, he forged documents to make it look like I was to blame. I lost everything. The room rustled with shock. The judge rapped for quiet, but whispers still threaded the benches. Do you have proof? Henry asked. Michael lifted a folder. Transfers, screenshots, emails where Daniel admits he needed the cash to cover the week's games. I kept it all. Claire's eyes went wide. Daniel tried to look bored, but sweat was beading at his hairline. Henry's final question was simple. In your opinion, is what he is attempting with my client consistent with his past behavior? Absolutely, Michael said. He always finds someone to exploit. It was me then. Now it's her. It's a pattern. The gallery broke into murmurs again. The judge called for order, but the truth was already loose in the room. Relief swept through me in a slow, steady wave. For the first time, someone outside my life had said out loud what I'd felt in my bones. Daniel wasn't just ungrateful, he was a practiced manipulator. But my relief brought a different ache with it. I looked at my daughter. Claire's hands were trembling in her lap, her face washed pale. Was she finally seeing the man beside her? When Michael stepped down, Daniel shot to his feet and slapped the table. He's lying. He's obsessed with me. The judge's gavel came down hard. One more outburst and you will be removed, Mr. Johnson. The mask had slipped. Everyone could see it. During the break, the hallway turned into a debate, stage reporters fishing for quotes, neighbors trading theories. I always thought something was off about that man, someone said. You're not alone anymore, Eleanor, another told me. Everyone saw it today. I nodded, tears, stinging tears that, for once, weren't from humiliation. Across the corridor, Claire sat beside Daniel, drained and silent. I recognized that look, the beginning of a reckoning you don't want, the kind you can't outrun. Back in the courtroom, Henry moved to admit Michael's records, bank transfers, old messages, a neat paper trail of a life lived on deceit. The judge allowed them in. Daniel tried to interrupt again and earned a clipped warning. The temperature in the room had changed. People weren't buying his act anymore. Outside afterward, a reporter asked how I felt about the testimony that had blown my son-in-law's character wide open. Relieved, I said. I've said all along, this wasn't just a family misunderstanding. It's bigger. Today, the truth started speaking for itself. That's what I trust. At the bakery, the impact came fast. Customers who'd once looked at me with doubt began leaving notes of support on the wall, little squares of paper that felt like bricks added to a foundation. We're with you, Eleanor. Don't let them erase your story. Your strength inspires us. I read each one quietly, letting my soul knit itself back together stitch by stitch. Daniel lashed out on the radio the next day. She's clever, he said. But everyone knows she can't run that bakery alone. One day she'll forget the oven and burn the place down. I listened to the clip with my jaw tight. Fear flared, then cooled into resolve. Henry's idea was bold. Let's turn the spotlight around. Host an open day. Work in front of everyone. Let them see your clarity and precision with their own eyes. I hesitated, then nodded. If they want a show, they'll get the truth. Live. Saturday we opened the doors wide. I scaled and mixed, balanced books, logged orders, answered phones, timed bakes to the minute. Henry documented everything, timestamps, receipts, the quiet choreography of a woman who knows her craft. By closing, even the skeptics looked different. Doubt had nowhere left to sit. When I locked up, an envelope was waiting under the door. Inside was a photo of me, talking with Michael at court. On the back, scrawled in block letters, "Don't trust anyone." Cold slid down my spine. It wasn't just a taunt, it was an engineered wedge, designed to splinter my few remaining alliances. For a heartbeat, suspicion flickered. What if Michael had an angle? What if Henry did? I set my jaw and refused the bait. I slipped the photo into my growing file. Morning brought more eyes on me, customers, whispering, glancing between their orders and the door. Half curious, half furious, half afraid. I greeted each person steadily. If the town was watching, then let them watch me work. That afternoon, I showed Henry the photo. He frowned. They want to rot your trust. If you start doubting everyone, you become unstable. But remember, every new threat strengthens your case. It proves the campaign against you. I nodded. It's strange how, the more they push, the more I see that I'm still standing. I didn't know I could hold this much. That's what truth does, Henry said. They exhaust themselves propping up a lie. You just keep living. That night, another envelope. You will lose everything. I didn't cry. I opened my notebook and wrote, I've lost plenty. My daughter's kindness, friends I thought were loyal, but I haven't lost myself. While I'm here, I won't lose everything. The threats escalated, notes under the door, blocked calls, stray comments tossed like stones on sidewalks. She won't make it to trial. That bakery will have a new owner soon. I listened. I also refused them. But the night they slipped into my house again, my body understood a different terror. The kitchen window was cracked. On the table lay another photo, me asleep again. Under it, 4 words. Next time won't be. My legs went weak. I sat, breathing, until the room stopped tilting. Then I called Henry. They were inside again, I said. They're watching me even when I sleep. I'm filing for protective measures and police patrols, he answered. This is beyond any boundary. Eleanor, they're desperate. They escalate because they're losing. Do not let them win the one thing they're after, your peace. I wasn't sure peace was available anymore, but I could choose defiance. At the shop, I started telling trusted customers the truth of the threats, quietly, carefully. Word spread not as gossip, but as outrage. The story shifted. She's being persecuted, and she still shows up. Minds changed. Hearts followed. On Sunday, Pastor James addressed our congregation. We don't let injustice thrive in silence, he said. Eleanor has stood for this town a long time. Now we stand for her. The sanctuary filled with applause I didn't expect. Tears pricked my eyes, the kind that clean rather than flood. That evening, a new message waited on my porch, a single key to my bakery door. I lifted it, the metal cold in my palm. It wasn't a key so much as a message. We can get in anytime we want. I locked everything twice and tucked the key into the evidence box with the photos and notes. Every violation was a wound. Yes, but also a blade turned back toward the people who'd cut me. In Henry's office the next day, he turned the key over in his fingers. Someone inside duplicated this. We need to find out who, David, I asked, the name sour in my mouth. Maybe he owes Daniel, Henry said carefully, but we won't accuse without proof. Use it to show access and intimidation. The stronger the pattern, the weaker their concerned family story becomes. I nodded. They're trying to break me. Every step they take, I turn into a plank I can stand on. By then, the town knew about the key. Concern sharpened into anger. This is criminal, a customer told me, voice shaking. No one does this to their own. Another just whispered, I'm sorry, and squeezed my hand. That afternoon, the phone rang with a blocked number. A disguised voice said, the key is just the beginning. Keep fighting and you'll have nothing left. I hung up. Then I rang up the next order. smiled at the next child, counting quarters for cookies, and carried on. That night I wrote in my notebook, I was left out of my daughter's wedding, smeared by neighbors, undermined by a young employee, called confused by people who know better, but my soul isn't up for sale. On Sunday, Pastor organized a prayer circle. People rose and spoke my name out loud as if returning it to me, polished. When I left, hugs followed me to the door. Later Henry arrived, eyes alight with new facts. I'm almost certain David duplicated that key. But there's more. He's in debt to Daniel. Pressure payoffs. If we can get him to admit it, their case explodes. I stared at the key on my table. The symbol of intrusion had become a hinge. Then let's use it, I said. Let this key open the one door they can't lock: the truth. Sometime after midnight, my phone jolted me awake. A whisper on the line: the next hearing will be the last. Be ready. The silence that followed was somehow louder than the threat. I lay in the dark, eyes open, knowing the final round was coming in, knowing I would not go to it small. The next hearing will be the last. The threat still echoed in my head. I barely slept, but when morning came, something in me had changed. Fear didn't paralyze me anymore. It moved through me like a quiet current, pushing me forward. Over breakfast I made a list of everything to review before the final showdown. Documents, witnesses, recordings, photos of the threats, the mystery key. Every item felt like a brick in a wall I was building against their lies. I opened my notebook and wrote, if this really is the last one, let it be my victory, not out of revenge, but for my dignity. At Henry's office, we gathered the people who had decided to stand with me. Michael, Daniel's former business partner, Susan, my oldest friend in town, and Thomas and Ruth Custvus, who had watched my bakery grow over the years. Henry spread folders across the table. We have solid ground, a legitimate medical evaluation confirming your full capacity, Daniel's own incriminating recording, the threatening notes and photos, proof of the forged loans, and now the key that implies unauthorized access. I can testify again, Michael said. Others are willing to confirm how Daniel operated. Susan squeezed my hand. Don't worry. I've seen you work every day. You never once missed my order. I looked at each of them, gratitude warming the tired parts of me. Thank you. I don't know if we'll win the case, but I know I'm not alone. There was one piece still loose. David, the employee who'd testified against me. Henry spoke carefully. If he admits he was pressured, their narrative collapses. I've reached out discreetly. He seems willing to talk, but he's scared. Then we show him he won't be destroyed for telling the truth, I said. If I can stand up, so can he. As the days crept toward the hearing, my bakery became a small fortress of support. People left flowers, notes, even quiet donations. To some, I had become a symbol for a larger fight. One morning, an older woman stopped by, paid for a small loaf, and leaned in softly. Your struggle is the struggle of many of us. We've been silenced long enough. Thank you for not giving up. Her words sank deep. I realized this battle wasn't only mine. It belonged to countless women who'd been made invisible, dismissed, or replaced. On the eve of the hearing, Henry pulled me aside. Prepare yourself. Daniel will play dirty. He'll try to provoke you, humiliate you, make you lose control. Remember, every word matters. The judge sees the manipulation, but he must also see the woman of integrity you've always been. Don't worry, I said. I've been humiliated in silence before. Now I know how to turn silence into a weapon. That night I walked the bakery alone. I ran my hand across each glass case and dented pen the shape of a life built in sugar and patience. This wasn't just a business. It was my name, my story, my legacy. I held the copied key up to the light. They might have found their way into my space, I thought, but they would never hold the key to who I am. I tucked it into the evidence folder. Near midnight there was a knock. David stood on my porch, pale, red-eyed, sweating, glancing up and down the street as if someone might be watching. Come in, I said. He sat at the kitchen table, twisting his cap. His voice was barely a whisper. Ms. Carter, I lied in court. I didn't want to, but I didn't know what else to do. Tell me everything, I said, even as my heart rattled in my chest. 2 weeks before the hearing, Daniel showed up at my place. He knew about my credit card debt, said he could fix it if I helped him. He offered money. He also threatened me, said he'd smear me as a thief if I refused. He gave me lines to repeat. I panicked, and I agreed. Tears slid down his face. I haven't slept since. Every time I see you working, I feel like a coward. They used me, and I let them. I can't do this anymore. You carried that lie alone? I asked. He nodded. I want to tell the truth. What you did was serious, I said. But admitting it now could change everything. Will you testify again? Tell the judge exactly what you told me? He stared at the table. Daniel will crush me if I do. He already said no one would believe me. I laid my hand over his. Look at me. I've faced exclusion, shame, threats, and break-ins. I'm still standing. If you tell the truth, you won't be alone. You'll be standing with justice. He wiped his face. I'll testify. I can't carry this any longer. The next morning, I took David to Henry. My lawyer listened quietly and made notes. When David finished, Henry nodded. This is critical. We'll request protective measures and register your statement. If Daniel tries to intimidate you again, it becomes yet another charge. That night I wrote in my notebook, they thought silence would suffocate me, but silence stores proof, and proof, when revealed, speaks louder than any shout. At the bakery, the change in me was visible. I stood taller. Margaret, ashamed, came in one afternoon for a loaf of bread, searching for my eyes. The court will hear the truth, I told her. There'll be no room for half measures there. She left without a word. On Saturday, Henry gathered the team, Michael, Susan, Thomas, and Ruth, and now David. This is our side, he said. Tomorrow, we won't just defend. We'll accuse, piece by piece. We'll lay out the conspiracy. Later that night, I found another envelope at my door. Inside was a single sheet of paper, blank but smeared with red, like blood. My breath hitched. A final warning, I thought. I lifted the page and murmured, "You can stain paper, you won't stain my name." Before dawn, I dressed in the same navy dress I'd worn to every hearing, a small ritual of steadiness. I packed the proof, the notebook, and the key. In the mirror, I didn't see a defeated woman. I saw someone who had survived everything and was ready to finish what she started. Henry pulled up right on time. Ready more than ever, I said. By the time we reached the courthouse, a crowd had formed, reporters, neighbors, and strangers who had learned my story. Inside, the air was heavy. Claire and Daniel were already in their seats, she hollow-eyed, he rigid and defiant. I walked to my place without flinching. Henry whispered, "We don't have to shout, Eleanor. We just have to show who you are." "They've shouted enough," I said. "Now I'll let the truth do the talking." The judge opened the session. "We will hear the last witnesses and review the evidence before issuing a ruling." Daniel's attorney repeated the same tired story: concerned daughter, responsible son. The words fell flat. When Henry rose, the room shifted. This is not care. This is a pattern: manipulation, fraud, and coercion. Today will prove that Ms. Carter is fully capable and has been the target of a calculated attempt to strip her of her life's work. Michael testified again about Daniel's past fraud. Susan and Ruth described, in detail, my precision with orders and accounts. And then David took the stand. His voice shook, but the truth poured out. I lied before. Daniel pressured me. He paid me and threatened me to speak against Ms. Carter. I can't live with it. She's always been fair to me. The lie is his, not hers. The room jolted. Claire shut her eyes. Daniel slammed his palm on the table, and the judge snapped, "Enough." Henry touched my hand. "If you want to speak, speak now." I stood and moved to the front. "Your Honor, I don't have many words. I've lived my life with dignity. I built my bakery with my own hands. I raised my daughter alone. If I'm here, it's because the people who should have stood beside me chose to humiliate and destroy me. They failed. They failed because I know who I am and what I've built. All I ask is the right to remain the owner of my own life." Silence settled over the room, heavy, respectful. Even the cameras dipped. I returned to my seat. Whatever happened next, I had already won something larger. I hadn't let fear steal my voice. The judge adjusted his glasses. "This court will issue its decision tomorrow." A rustle of whispers. I breathed out slowly. The end was closer than ever. I woke before dawn. The sky was still gray, and the hush inside my house felt like the quiet that comes before something enormous. I dressed slowly, the same navy dress I wore to the other hearings, a small promise of steadiness. I poured a simple cup of coffee, and with every sip I sent up a silent prayer. I took my evidence folder, my notebook, and the strange key. I put everything in my bag as if I were carrying not just documents, but pieces of my own soul. Before I left, I wrote one last line in the notebook. Today is not the day they decide for me. Today is the day the truth decides for itself. Outside, Henry was already waiting. Ready, Eleanor? He asked. I gave him a small smile. If I weren't, I never would have made it this far. We drove through the quiet streets, but the closer we got to the courthouse, the more the scene changed. Reporters, cameras, onlookers, my case had crossed city lines. Now it was on regional radio, in neighboring papers. Inside the courtroom, the air was tight. Every bench was full. People stood along the walls. The looks were mixed, some compassionate, some judgmental. Claire and Daniel were already there. She looked worn down, her eyes red as if she had cried all night. He kept that defiant posture of his, but tension pulled at every muscle. When I walked in, the room fell quiet. I took my seat without looking away from the bench. The judge entered and brought down the gavel. This court will deliver its verdict today. All parties have been heard, all exhibits admitted. The decision will determine the future of Ms. Eleanor Carter. A chill traveled my spine. This was the moment before me. Daniel's attorney took his final shot. He leaned one more time on the script of filial concern, painting Claire as a desperate daughter and Daniel as a responsible son. But his voice sounded worn out, like a tune played too many times. Claire kept her eyes down, unable to hold up the story anymore. Henry rose for our side. Your Honor, this isn't just about paperwork, it's about an entire life. Eleanor Carter built a business from nothing, raised her daughter alone, and remains lucid, active, and independent. The real medical reports, the neighbors and customers who testified, the proof of fraud, and even the confession of coercion show that she is not the person the petitioners claim she is. She is, in fact, the victim of a calculated attempt to strip her of everything. He paused, then finished. Today, this court is not simply deciding guardianship, it is deciding whether truth can be erased by lies. I closed my eyes and let the words settle. Whatever came next, I knew I hadn't stayed silent. I had fought all the way. The judge adjusted his glasses, lifted the papers in front of him, and began. This matter involves serious allegations of incapacity against Ms. Eleanor Carter, brought by her daughter, Claire Johnson, and son-in-law, Daniel Johnson. The court has reviewed the filings, heard testimony, and considered the medical evidence. I kept my eyes on him, even as my heart hammered. First, I considered the statements describing forgetfulness and confusion. Ms. Dawson, a longtime neighbor, mentioned episodes where the respondent seemed distracted or forgetful. An employee, David, also described supposed mistakes at the bakery. A ripple moved through the room. I felt the weight of those words, but the judge went on. However, both accounts showed significant weaknesses. Ms. Dawson acknowledged, translated and localized for a U.S. audience, first-person narrative, word of my win traveled fast through town. In the days that followed, my bakery turned into a gathering place, not just for regulars, but for people who wanted to see me up close, hear my story, shake my hand. Some called me an example of courage, others simply said, "Thank you for standing your ground." At first it felt strange. I'd spent my life in the background behind the counter, tending dough and ovens. Suddenly I was public without ever choosing to be. But slowly I understood that visibility wasn't vanity, it was recognition. On Monday, I got to the bakery before dawn. I turned on the ovens, slid in the first trays of bread, and watched them rise. The familiar smell filled the room When I heard
and brought
someone me a say,
quiet
"Did sense you of see the
normal.
photos?"
I'm back.
Claire looked
I whispered
gorgeous
nod,
in her wedding
like
dress,
someone
the
returning
floor
from a
dropped
short
out
trip,
from under me,
but like
a
someone
sharp
who had
pain
survived
shot
a
through my
storm
chest
and found her
Claire,
way home.
married.
David
I
arrived
couldn't
not
believe
long
it.
after.
My own daughter
carrying
hadn't
flowers.
invited me to her
Here's
wedding.
to a new beginning.
Imagine
Ms.
being
Carter.
excluded
Thank you
from
for
the
giving
most
me another
important moment
chance.
of your
I
child's
smiled.
life. When your
Moved.
own family
We all
treats you
mess
like
up,
you're
David.
invisible,
What matters
the pain
is
cuts
what we
deep.
do after.
If you've ever
Today,
endured an
you start over
injustice
with
inside
me,
your family,
and so do
come
I.
with
He
me.
nodded.
This is my journey
Determined
to fight
Late
back
morning,
with the strength
Margaret
so
walked
many
in with
women
a simple
carry in
cake.
silence.
She came to the
Subscribe
counter
to the
with cautious
channel for
eyes.
more
I
stories
made
like
this for
mine and
you.
yours. I know it doesn't erase what happened, but I wanted to apologize. I took a breath. There was no bitterness in my voice, just a steady calm. Thank you, Margaret. I'll gladly accept the cake. Forgiveness might take a little longer. Maybe one day. She nodded, eyes wet, and slipped out quietly. At closing time, Claire came in. No flowers, no rehearsed apologies. She just asked for an apron. "Can I help today?" I studied her for a moment. She looked tired, but there was a light in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. Humility. I handed her an apron. Start with the mugs. That's where everyone begins. She didn't protest. She went straight to the sink and started scrubbing. The simple sight made my heart tremble. That night, home alone, I opened my notebook and wrote, "Today, I learned that victory isn't revenge. Victory is getting to choose again. To choose carefulforgiveness.com restarts, a life without fear. To choose to be the owner of my life." The following Sunday, church was full. Pastor James asked me to give a short testimony. I stepped up to the pulpit, nervous, but spoke honestly. Many of you walked this road with me. It wasn't easy. There were moments I thought about giving up, but I learned that truth will find its voice, and we are never as alone as we think. Thank you to everyone who stood by me. I hope my story reminds each of you, dignity isn't handed over, it's protected. Applause rolled through the sanctuary. I stepped down with tears in my eyes and a steady smile. Back at the bakery, there was a different kind of envelope waiting for me, not anonymous, not threatening. Inside was a handwritten letter and something I never expected, an invitation to speak at a local university about resilience and dignity. I read it again and again, surprised. Could my life be about to take on an even bigger purpose? I held the letter as if it were fragile glass. The words were simple but heavy with meaning. "We'd be honored if you shared your life experience with our students in a forum on dignity and resilience." I'd never pictured anything like that. Speaking to college students felt a world away from the rhythm of dough and sugar. For a few minutes, I just stared at the letter, feeling my heartbeat climb. The next morning, I showed it to Henry. "A talk. That's incredible, Eleanor. Your story can help a lot of people." I bit my lip, thinking, but do I have anything to say? I'm not a professor or a speaker. I'm just a baker who survived an injustice. Henry smiled. "That's exactly why they want you. Your voice is real. You represent so many ordinary people carrying quiet battles." His words kept echoing. At the bakery, I told Susan and Ruth about the invitation. Both of them lit up. "You have to go," Susan said. "Your story already changed this town. Imagine what it can do for others," Ruth added. I laughed, shy. "I've never stood on a stage. I don't even know where to begin." "Begin the way you always do," Ruth said, "by being yourself. The rest will follow." Not everyone saw it that way. Late in the day, Claire came over while drying mugs. "Mom, are you sure this is a good idea? Speaking to that many people, airing our family in public?" I looked at her quietly. "Claire, my life was exposed without my consent. For the first time, I'm being invited to tell my version. Maybe it's time to turn pain into something that teaches." She went silent, thoughtful. That night I wrote in my notebook, "I spent years afraid of being invisible. Then I feared being defamed. Now I have a chance to be heard by choice. Am I ready?" I stared at the sentence for a long time. There wasn't an immediate answer, but a small flame of curiosity was growing in me. 2 days later, the event organizer, Professor Linda, stopped by. Mid-40s, kind eyes. "Miss Carter, I know you might be unsure. We don't need someone perfect, we need someone true. Our students need to hear from a person who faced injustice and never lost her dignity. They need to believe that resistance is possible." I listened in silence, moved. Her words cracked the last of my fear. That night I wrote again. "I didn't choose this fight, but I chose not to be silent. Maybe it's time to carry my voice beyond these walls. Maybe it's time to show that even a baker can teach courage." The next morning I picked up the phone, dialed the university, and said, heart racing, "This is Eleanor Carter. I accept." They answered with a joy I could feel through the line. I smiled, nervous. A new kind of challenge had just begun. Since saying yes, I've felt equal parts excitement and nerves. That night, I tried to sleep and couldn't. I kept seeing a stage and me with no words. I woke with my heart pounding, got up, opened my notebook, and wrote in big letters, "I won't speak to impress, I'll speak to set free." With that, I lay back down, my heart quieter. The auditorium was packed, students, faculty, and even folks from town. The simple stage looked enormous to me. As I walked down the aisle, my legs trembled. Henry walked me to the side and reminded me with a small smile, "They don't want perfection, they want your truth." I nodded, but my pulse thudded in my ears. When the mic reached my hands, I looked out at the crowd. Hundreds of eyes waited. For a moment, fear tightened my throat. Then I remembered my notebook, the nights I wrote to stay sane, the notes posted on my bakery wall, the prayers whispered in the dark. I took a breath, My name is Eleanor Carter. Most people know me as the baker on the corner. For a long time, I was seen as less than capable, fragile, expendable. I'm here to tell you, I refuse to accept that version of me. The room went still. I told them about my simple life, the years raising my daughter alone, the bakery built with my hands. I spoke about being shut out of her wedding, about the humiliation and manipulation. But I didn't stay in the pain. I highlighted the resistance, the friends who stood with me, my faith, the community that found its voice. The court affirmed my sanity, I said, but what mattered more was the affirmation of my dignity. Dignity isn't granted by paperwork or stolen by lies. It's something we carry. Heads nodded, quiet tears, a silence that felt like listening. I ended simply, some of you still feel invisible. Maybe you've been called incapable, useless, weak. Here's what I want you to take with you. Don't let anyone define who you are. Be the owner of your life even when they try to take it from you. A deep quiet, then a swell of applause. I cried openly. It felt like a tide of kindness lifting me. Afterward, students lined up to hug me. My grandmother went through something like this, a young woman said. Hearing you helped me understand her strength. I used to think dignity was an empty word, a young man added. Today I realized it's the most concrete thing we have. I listened with gratitude, sensing my pain had become something else, shared hope. At the door, Henry smiled, proud. I told you your voice mattered. I laughed, wiping my eyes. I just spoke the way I always do. Seems that was enough. Back at the bakery that night, I found the wall covered with new notes from students and professors. Thank you for inspiring us. Your story changed the way I see my life. I will never accept being called incapable again. I read them all with tears in my eyes. Then I wrote in my notebook. I thought victory meant surviving court. It turns out real victory is turning pain into a voice, and voice into hope. Sitting alone in the sweet smell of fresh bread, surrounded by flowers and notes, I smiled. I was no longer just the woman who survived an injustice. I was someone reminding others that survival is possible. Life had taken much from me, but it had given me something new, purpose. And I understood this fresh start wasn't the end of the fight. It was the beginning of a new story. With the public attention came new opportunities. A nonprofit that supports women in vulnerable situations invited me to volunteer at weekly groups. A high school asked me to speak with teens about self-respect. I said yes gratefully, but carefully. My bakery is my base, my ground. I didn't want to lose myself in the noise of sudden attention. Claire watched everything. She was still washing mugs, wiping tables, learning how to begin again in silence. One night she said, I never imagined I'd hear you on the radio. I think I always underestimated you. I looked at her calmly. Everyone underestimated me, Claire. Even me, but I don't anymore. The words hung between us like a quiet invitation to reconciliation. That week, I received a letter I didn't expect. Not a thank you, not an invitation. It was from Daniel, sent from jail, while he awaited investigation for fraud. Eleanor, I know I messed up, but you could still help me. If you testify on my behalf, maybe we can make a deal. Think about Claire. I closed the letter before finishing it. A small ache, yes, but an unshakable clarity took. I wouldn't go back to ease the path of someone who had tried to erase me. That night I wrote, they still tried to pull me down. But now I know, my life is no longer defined by fear or manipulation. My life is mine. A few days later, another letter arrived, this one from a stranger named Helen, age 72. I read about you in the paper. My family is trying to silence me too, saying I can't live on my own. Thank you. Your courage gave me strength to fight. I pressed the letter to my chest, grateful. Maybe my voice had traveled farther than I knew. That night I stood with Claire in the kitchen. She washed plates. I wrote in my notebook. Finally, she asked, can you still love me after all this? I lifted my eyes, full of feeling. Claire, the love never died. Trust it. But if you truly change, maybe we can rebuild it. We hugged and cried quietly. It was an embrace full of possibility. Later, I watched the autumn sky burn red. The air was cold, but something warm was alive inside me. On the last page of that notebook I wrote, they tried to exclude me. They tried to silence me. They tried to destroy me. Now I know, it wasn't only my life at stake. It was the dignity of all of us. And dignity is never surrendered. It's earned. I closed the notebook, slipped it into my bag, and went inside. For the first time in a long time, I smiled, not as a survivor, but as the author of my own life. And you, what would you do in my place? Would you have the strength to stand up to your own family? Tell me in the comments what you think. Like this video, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story like this one.